Well, hello and welcome to Smart Impressions. I'm Rachel, and we've been talking about events, and there is no doubt that sometimes they can go a little wrong. And there's no doubt that we're going to talk about this today because our show is called When Plans Fall Apart, Winning at Events When Things Go Wrong. And I got no other than an author who wrote the book, What to Do When Things Go Wrong. So thank you, Frank Supovitz. Thank you so much for coming and joining me today. He's the president of Fast Traffic Events, which is all about sports entertainment and bringing the best of the sports industry together. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Rachel.
I love to just jump right into it. And there's no doubt you're dealing with a lot of events that potentially have a lot of errors of going wrong and going in different directions. Tell me this book that you came out with, how did you get started? What was really the trigger for you to get to write it?
Everybody talks about the things that go right for them, right? How smart they are, what wonderful products they put out there, what wonderful services, wonderful experiences. Um, I just felt it was kind of important to learn from mistakes and talk about them. They say that it's a lot better to learn from things that go wrong than things that go right. And I think that's true. But I think it's way better to learn from things that went wrong for somebody else rather than having it happen to you. And use those lessons to be able to lower your risks and have your outcomes be better.
Absolutely. I'd rather learn from someone else's mistakes for sure. And I bet absolutely. Well, there's no doubt this book must be sharing so much knowledge and expertise about what things they have to look out for, when things go wrong. And I remember my dad used to say, best made plans tend to go awry. And we know in events, they always go awry, right?
Yeah, they sure do. And they go
So there's no
awry
doubt.
in front of a lot of people.
Well, that's exactly what I want to talk about because your experience with the sports industry, you're bringing together all these people. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of people at one time, right? What are some
Yes.
of the main ways that kind of where things drop and can go wrong that happen more so than we realize?
Well, they can really come from anywhere. We event people are control freaks. And that, by the way, that makes us so good at what we do, right? We sweat every detail. We are very thoughtful about designing every detail of the physical environment and the content, the program, the set, the show floor, the crowd flow, ceremonies, programming, logistics, lighting, sound, video playback, menus, the digital environment. We're all about the details, and there's tons of them. And the more details there are, the more places where things can go wrong. And by the way, the longer we've been doing this, maybe the fewer things that are likely to go wrong happen in the places where we can control. Now, I've been managing and producing events for more than 40 years. But if the soundboard goes down, which it did at one of my events this past winter, or if the power fails in the venue, which has happened to me more than once, maybe most infamously at the Super Bowl about 10 years ago, if the ticket scanners go offline, which happens all the time, those things don't care about how much experience we have, how masterful we are, how much planning we did. Those things just go wrong, and we have to respond to them in some way. We have to either solve for them or we have to manage them when the solutions are somewhat elusive to us. Now,
Well,
we just saw the White House Correspondents' Dinner get shut down and ultimately evacuated in the United States because of the intent of a bad actor. So sometimes it's things we can control. Sometimes it's stuff that's just happening out in the marketplace, and we just have to deal with them. We've seen acts of terror and war disrupt the ability to host events um, pretty much everywhere in the Middle East and sometimes in the United States and in Europe when things happen. All of those things can just make a mess out of our best laid plans. We don't see those things coming, but we still have to be ready for them.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. You mentioned a couple things like audio failures and then like unprecedented, like kind of surprises of people that enter an environment. Obviously, there's a lot of unexpected challenges that can go wrong depending on the complexity of the type of event, right?
Yeah.
Um, what do you see that really separates the teams that adapt really well and succeed versus those that really struggle when things go off track? Because it's really
Mm.
hard to set, to kind of practice these things. They're so sudden, right? So this adaptability really is a question, of how their execution affects the entire performance. And that's what it is, right? It's events, a kind of a performance with people that are engaged.
Well, you can prepare for them, but let's talk about a few things. Um, there has to be preparation in your process for contingency planning, right? What to do if certain things go wrong. Now, in order to create those contingency plans, you have to have spent a little time imagining what those obstacles could be, right? There's tons of those potential pitfalls. And when they happen, you have to be a little thoughtful about how you're going to respond. Now, notice I didn't say react, I said respond. There's a big difference. A reaction is something that we do immediately and almost instinctively. It's a knee jerk, right? Something happens, we react and put something in place. Now, reactions may work sometimes by virtue of our experience because we're acting fast. But let's slow it down just a little bit and consider what ramifications our course of action might generate. So let me give you an example. When we experienced a power failure at the Super Bowl in New Orleans in 2013, it got dark in the stadium and we had to stop the game. Now, we had 150 million people watching on television in the United States alone, and we had 70,000 people in the venue. And so we wanted to get started again right away. Let's find the plug, put it back in the wall, let's go. But we had to find out whether the power failure was a symptom of something worse. So was it a terror attack? Was it cyber terror? Was there a fire that disrupted the power? If it was an unsafe environment, we needed to evacuate the building because health and safety is always going to come first. So that's piece number one. Health and
Right.
safety, whatever decision you're going to make in whatever situation you're in, health and safety comes first. Now, if it was just an equipment failure, we didn't want to evacuate 70,000 people in case we could get the event started again. But we had to tell people what to do. We didn't want them streaming for the exits because they were scared, they were uninformed, they were relying on social media to tell them what to do, which would be generated by people who weren't even in the building. So we had to tell people what to do. And within a couple of minutes, we had determined, our team had, that it was an equipment failure. There was no fire, there was no attack or anything like that. It was fixable so that we could tell people to stay, chill out, we'll fix the problem. And we could do that because in most places of public assembly, a public address system is on a separate power system. It's on a backup battery so that you can talk to people if something like this were to happen, right? So we had the lights back on in about 24 minutes. But there was an enormous amount of pressure to get started again. But we didn't do that because that would have been a reaction. We had thought about this, and we knew that notwithstanding the pressure to get started again, when the power was interrupted, it would also have affected all of the electronic systems we needed for a safe and authentic game. So we had to check the score clock. Was that working? We had to check all the communication systems. Were they working? We had to check the instant replay system because if there was a controversial play and the referees had to go check the instant replay and there was no instant replay, now you don't have an authentic game anymore, right? And there's always going to be this question and controversy about whether the game was played fairly, right? So we spent another 10 minutes checking everything. Television wanted us to get started again. The players wanted to get started again. The teams wanted to get started again. Certainly the 70,000 people there wanted to get started again. We waited. we waited. We thought about it. We checked it. And one of the key communication systems was not working, wasn't properly rebooted. So we took time to fix that. So, you know, responding thoughtfully is one way that you differentiate your team when they have to respond to another thing like this. The other is, I would say, they have to remain calm and focused on the problem, because panic paralyzes decision making. It's also, by the way, contagious. So if you're leading a team and you panic and you get excited, one of two things is going to happen. Either people around you are going to start panicking too, or they're going to simply ignore you because you've lost control. So you're going to feel anxious. That's normal. Your body is going to react by releasing adrenaline into your bloodstream, and that initiates the fight or flight response. But psychologists have proven this. If you redirect your nervous energy and focus on solving the problem, you can effectively counteract that anxiety. So calmness, professionalism, focus on the solution, that's what makes the difference with teams that respond to these kinds of things.
Wow, you that was a whole bunch of good stuff right there. And I want to encourage anyone that listens to this show right now to jump into the conversation. If you got some events that you are planning, that you're thinking about problem areas that maybe you haven't considered, Frank, it sounds like you've gone through it all, from TVs going down to entertainment to, sound, technology, the works, which is the whole shebang for millions of people. There's no doubt that I'd love people to jump into the conversation and really ask their questions should they have. So I know our time runs very fast, especially when the conversation's so great. I feel like we can go talk for an hour of all the nightmare experiences you've run into, but problem solving it in the best way to reduce that panic is clearly a core priority, right?
It is.
So what would just to wrap this up, there's one thing we love to give our community and everyone listening so they can walk away with the real top tips. And we're going to say, let's say 3 ways that if you are planning an event and you are planning a big performance on some grand scale or even small, what are 3 ways that teams can really handle the unexpected and still deliver strong business outcomes? What would be your top 3? Because I'm sure there's quite a lot, especially all the things we talked about so far.
I could write a book. Well, let's touch on contingency planning.
Okay.
Contingencies focus on the predictable, the existential, the financially impactful. But you can't plan for everything that's going to possibly happen. But anything can happen, right? That's why you create these contingency plans. But the most important for you to remember is you need to plan for anything that might happen, not everything that might happen. So what I mean by that is, you need to develop response plans that can be used for any number of different situations. We didn't have a specific plan for power failure, but maybe we should have. But we had a plan instead for what we would do if the event was interrupted by anything that was unforeseen and beyond our control. So we developed that plan as a result of conducting tabletop exercises. We did rehearse from an operational perspective. We'd get everybody together for a week, about a week before the event, anybody who had an active decision-making role on event day, and have a facilitator poke holes in our plans. And so we created scenarios that we had to simulate a response to. And some were crises, and some were just interruptions and inconveniences. And we'd come up with ways of solving the problem as a team, no matter what it was. So do one of those tabletop exercises and figure out if you've got a good plan and what kinds of contingencies you might have to put in place for anything that might happen. That's number 1. Number 2 is there's a triage process when something does go wrong, especially if more than one thing is going wrong at a time, which often is the case. First, you have, like I said, right at the top, you have to deal with anything that poses a threat to health or security. That's non-negotiable. I often had to make an inconvenient decision because I kept someone from getting hurt or from something worse. Well, why did the gates not open up on time? Well, that's an operational thing, but maybe I did it because I had an unsafe condition in the building, which actually did occur. Why did the program start late? Why did the buses drop me off 2 blocks away? It was all to reduce or eliminate a safety risk. And then there are brand risks, right? That's the next step down on the triage. The things that can pose an existential threat to your organization or to the organizations that are working with you on the trade show floor, for example. Direct financial risks or serious reputational risks that can pose a serious financial impact. Assuming that health and safety is managed, will my decisions negatively affect how the world views my organization or my client's organization? And at the end, there are situations, and maybe all of them, where we're worried about our own personal reputation. That's way down on the list, right? Because it's not about you. If you manage the problem well, your reputation might actually be enhanced. So go through that triage process. That's number 2. And number 3, resist the urge to create contingency plans that just tick the box, right? You think you have something workable without really fully considering how those plans are going to be put into action. Your contingencies have to be actionable. So a lot of plans look great on paper, but you find out when push comes to shove and something does go wrong, that they're simply not easily actionable. So, for example, moving people from one side of a stadium to the other because it's too crowded on one side and not crowded on the other, that sounds like a good plan. But what if they have to walk a mile and a half to do it? That's not actionable, right? What if you don't have people to tell people to move to the other side? All of those kinds of things have to be thought all the way through. So resist the urge to tick the box and move on.
Fantastic. Well, just to reiterate that, there's some good stuff here. The predictability of the planning, the triage that you mentioned, I'm sure there's a whole long list of stuff to really think about. Safety always is number 1, there's no doubt. And then the actionable planning to really execute it effectively, and not that just your figment of your imagination, but it's actually going to work when there's tons of people involved. Exactly. I love this saying, fail to plan to fail, so I think these tips are just reiterating that planning is core to making your event as successful as possible for everyone involved. Frank, this is good stuff. We can go into a whole bunch of conversations around this. I know that you've really seen the gamut of problem areas go wrong. So I encourage everyone to pick up that book and hear all those stories inside, and reach out should they have any questions. I am so grateful that you came to join us today on Smart Impressions. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Well, it's just another great show where we're just talking about all the stuff around events to make them the best and really convert to the best that you need for your customers, for your sponsors, for your attendees, and just for you to make the best impact to events around the world. Frank from Fast Traffic is clearly doing it in the best effective way and making sure that problem areas, even though they may exist, are predictable and are planned so they cannot affect it in any negativity. So again, we love to have you here. Please jump into the conversation. And until then, we'll see you next time on Smart Impressions. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.